everyone, it's Chaplain April, and I wanted to pick up where we left off in the last video because yes, I did this long video on the fear of God, and but at the very end, the last point was one of the main points, so I want to talk about that today. And I have gone to great lengths to get the shot, this video shot where you can see my Bible so you can study with me. We're going to study together through, so you can, kind of go through the scriptures with me, etc. So the point that I wanted to stay with today is the fact that, okay, the fear of God. So there was two main points at the end. The fear of God is the beginning of wisdom. And why do we want to fear the Lord? Is because if we don't fear Him, we won't take sin seriously. So those are the 2 points that I want to talk about in this video. So this is part 2 of the fear of the Lord. So let's talk about the fear of God as is the beginning of wisdom. So what is wisdom? So there's wisdom books in the Bible, and if I remember correctly, so it's like Psalm, Proverbs, and Ecclesiastes. Those are wisdom books that are said to have been written by Solomon, which was King David's son. And at one point, he's the wisest man on earth. So he wrote the Psalms, but Proverbs is the main book of wisdom, I would say. There's actually a lot of books of wisdom. There's more than those 3, but let's focus on Proverbs. That is the main book of wisdom written by Solomon. So let's look in our Who's Who in the Bible, a little handy booklet here, and look up Solomon. Okay, so I can just read to you what it says about Solomon. Haha. He ruled in 970 to 930 BC. And then in 2 Samuel 12:24, well, I guess we should look that up, right? 2 Samuel 12:24. See what that says. So today I have the Keyword Study Bible. It is New American Standard Version. And my mentor actually gifted this to me. I was reading that in here the other day, but I didn't put a date. Oh, yes, I did. January 2012. So 10 years ago. She gave this to me. But it actually looks like a Bible that I had in college. It looks just like it, but no, it's not, because that other one is an NIV. I'm gonna look and see if I have that in my Bible stash. I'm gonna do a video on how many Bibles do I have one day, and do a little kind of fun video on that, and we'll see if it's in there, and then I can talk about each Bible and story behind it. So this is New American Standard. Solomon is born. Oh, okay, so that's when Solomon is born. Then David comforted his wife Bathsheba and went into her and lay with her, and she gave birth to a son, and he named him Solomon. Now the Lord loved him and sent word through Nathan the prophet, and he named him Jedediah for the Lord's sake. So that was another name that Solomon had, Jedediah. By all accounts, King Solomon was the wisest man of his era, a master of proverbial love, and an insightful problem solver. I guess we will. Despite his famed sagacity, he was often discouraged and led astray by others. He made a number of compromises, and eventually his heart grew cold to God. I don't like that. Such contradictions make it difficult for those seeking to study the reputed wisdom of Solomon. Solomon succeeded to the throne of Israel in an unprecedented manner. Unlike Saul or David, he did not have the triumphant military war record or the charismatic personality to be anointed king. Instead, he had the political pull of Bathsheba, his mother and David's favorite wife. Although others were in line ahead of him for the throne, Solomon won the kingship through the influence that his mother and Nathan the prophet wielded over David. Later, Solomon's faith would be eroded by the influence of the religions of his many foreign wives, among whom were Hittites, Moabites, Edomites, Sidonians, and Ammonites. Early in his reign, Solomon received a vision of God while performing a sacrifice. When God asked the young king what gift he wanted, Solomon asked for wisdom to discern between good and evil. So that tells us that in 1 Kings. So let's go there. 1 Kings 3:9. Kings 3:9. Let's look at that. So give thy servant an understanding heart to judge thy people, to discern between good and evil, for who is able to judge this great people of thine? All right, so let's read before this so we can really understand Solomon's prayer. So 1 Kings 3:6 and on. Solomon said, Thou hast shown great loving kindness to thy servant David my father, according as he walked before thee in truth and righteousness and uprightness of heart toward thee. And thou hast reserved for him this great loving kindness, that thou hast given him a son to sit on his throne, as it is this day. And now, O Lord my God, thou hast made thy servant king in place of my father David, yet I am but a little child. I do not know how to go out or come in. And thy servant is in the midst of thy people which thou hast chosen, a great people who cannot be numbered and counted for multitude. So give thy servant an understanding heart to judge thy people, to discern between good and evil, for who is able to judge this great people of thine? So Solomon is asking him for wisdom. God's answer in verse 10, and it was pleasing in the sight of the Lord that Solomon had asked this thing. And God said to him, because you have asked this thing and have not asked for yourself long life, nor have asked riches for yourself, nor have you asked for the life of your enemies, but have asked for yourself discernment to understand justice. Behold, I have done according to your words. Behold, I have given you a wise and discerning heart, so that there has been no one like you before, nor shall one like you arise after you. And I have also given you what you have not asked, both riches and honor, so that there will not be any among the kings like you all your days. And if you walk in my ways, keeping my statutes and commandments as your father David walked, then I will prolong your days. Then Solomon awoke, and behold, it was a dream, and he came to Jerusalem and stood before the ark of the covenant of the Lord, and offered burnt offerings and made peace offerings and made a feast for all his servants. So Solomon becomes the wisest person in the world. I mean, he was extremely wise. It was just something he asked God for. God gifted it to him. So then you can read about how he wisely judges things, different accounts in 1 Kings. And then he becomes wealthy, and a powerful king. All right, what does it say in here? So Solomon asked for wisdom to discern between good and evil, so that he might be a better ruler of God's people. The request so pleased God that he also bestowed a blessing of wealth and prosperity on the king. The famous decisions in which Solomon resolved a dispute over an infant to serve to demonstrate that God had granted Solomon's request. So it goes on to talk about that. He established a centralized monarchy and even tax system for his people. He divided the nation into 12 regions, each of which was responsible for provisioning the court for 1 month of the year. He established strong trading alliances with other nations. He also undertook extensive building projects, dedicating 7 years to building the temple his father had dreamed of. Blah, blah, blah. I mean, he did all these things. So it was a known fact, it was known that he was wise. Let's see. Solomon was a prolific writer and is credited with having authored some 3,000 proverbs, 1,000 songs, and several books of the Bible. So Solomon is credited with writing Ecclesiastes. What else? Okay, we hadn't gotten to that yet. Okay, some of his writings indicate that Solomon was keenly aware that the material accomplishments of his reign meant nothing next to the spiritual decay of his life. So he ends up kind of falling away from God, which is really sad, because here we have this amazing king and who's very wise. Like, God gave him this gift, So I don't really want to go into that where he falls away, but the part where he is wise and he's writing is just an amazing thing. Book of Ecclesiastes, and then of course Song of Solomon. So sometimes his words convey a deep cynicism and lack of joy. Solomon warns of focusing one's efforts on self instead of on God. I saw all the deeds that are done under the sun, and see all his vanity and a chasing after the wind. I kind of really agree with him on that. It just seems like a lot of it is chasing after the wind. From his failures and pain, and with the wisdom of hindsight, he concludes, remember your Creator in the days of your youth. Fear God and keep his commandments, for that is the whole duty of everyone. For God will bring every deed into judgment, including every secret thing, whether good or evil. So for books of scripture credited to Solomon, see Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and the Song of Solomon. And in Jewish tradition, he is also credited with writing the apocryphal book, The Wisdom of Solomon. So the Apocrypha is books that are outside the canon of the Bible, taken out for some reason. We probably should do a video on that. But the point is, he was extremely, extremely wise, and he wrote Proverbs. So in Proverbs 8:13, what is this? Okay, so this is Esther. That's my favorite book of the Bible. Okay, Proverbs. Let's see. Proverbs 8:13. All right. So, with our opening statement, right, the fear of God is the beginning of wisdom. And in Proverbs 8:13, it says, the fear of the Lord is to hate evil, pride and arrogance, and the evil way and the perverted mouth I hate. So, the fear of the Lord is to hate evil. So, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. And here it's saying, and this is wisdom in Proverbs, it's saying the fear of the Lord is to hate evil. So wisdom is to hate evil, right? And God hates evil. So let's look up a scripture where it would tell us that God hates evil. Okay, well, there's another Psalm, 97:10. Oh, I'm in Proverbs. No wonder I couldn't find it. Hello. Okay, Proverbs doesn't have that many. 97:10, and I didn't bring any glasses. This is great. Hate evil, you who love the Lord, who preserves the souls of his godly ones. He delivers them from the hand of the wicked. So it's telling us in Psalms to hate evil. So the fear of the God is the beginning of wisdom. It's wisdom to hate evil. And then it's telling us to hate evil, those who love the Lord. So we can make the correlation, God hates evil. So Proverbs 6:16 through 19. There are six things with which the Lord hates. Yes, 7, which are an abomination to him. Haughty eyes, a lying tongue, and hands that shed innocent blood, a heart that devises wicked plans, feet that run rapidly to evil, a false witness who utters lies, and one who spreads strife among brothers. All of those things that he hates are evil. They're wicked, evil things. So God hates evil, right? We know this because his word instructs us in this, and his word is absolutely reliable. So love and hate are opposites, right? Love and hate are opposites. So God is love. And not only is he love, but everything that he does is loving. That's why he hates evil, because it's his opposite, right? It's his opposite. Anything that is evil and wicked is opposite of loving. And so he does not like that. He despises it. So God does not allow evil in heaven, okay? And I've said this in a couple other videos. So people get very upset, and you know, rightly so, because there's so much evil on the earth. And so if God is love and he hates evil, then why is this evil here? Why are all these horrible things happening? I mean, you only have to watch the news for about 2 minutes before you see evil things, you know, wars and this and murders and just you name it, you know, evil things happening on the daily, you know, and here in our city, evil things happen on a daily basis. I mean, there's just so much evil, and so people mistake that for God being up there, you know, oblivious to it, or not caring, or, you know, he's up there with all this power and he could just stop all the evil. And, you know, that really is another video. But, and I've been saying that I'm going to talk about that for probably 2 years now. But that is a huge subject that theologians have debated for centuries. So I have to get that one right. But what I'm telling you right now is that evil and love are opposites. Okay, so if you love God and you want to fear God, okay, this whole video is about fearing God. So you fear God, which is a reverence, an awe, and a love for him. So you have that reverence and awe, and it's because he is love and loving. So if you're going to have that reverence and awe for him, you are going to hate evil, and God also hates evil. So could he, you know, act like, you know, one of these video games and take his scepter and just boom, 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 get rid of all the evil? Yes, he could. But at the same time, he has to allow people to have their choices. You know, that's the sad part, is if people were choosing right, then there wouldn't be any evil, right? If people were making the right choices, there wouldn't be poor countries. You know, a lot of people are like, well, what about all these people that are starving and, you know, they don't have water? And trust me, I have a humanitarian heart. So I have compassion for all of that. That's why I advocate. That's why my master's is international studies, because I wanted to go into the humanitarian arena and be with one of these agencies that does things like that. Either brings food to people, the poor, or housing for the homeless, or water wells. You know, I love all of those things. So here's the thing. So even though people are making the wrong choices on a daily basis, and they're making their choices based on evil, they're not making choices based on love, because, you know, I mean, we can blame it on that, because, so we blame it on the enemy, first of all. I mean, and the buck stops with the enemy, I think, because The enemy is the one that is causing evil. He's putting thoughts in people's minds. He's manipulating and deceiving people into acting the way that they do. So people are deceived, manipulated into acting that way. So some of these countries, I'm not going to just name one because, I don't know, take your pick, but a country that is impoverished and all of their people are impoverished. It's easy to say, okay, well, that's God's fault, right? But we have to stop blaming God for what men are doing, because the governments of those countries are choosing evil, because they're not choosing to help their people. They're not choosing to put things in place that would allow for things to be better, and they're not putting these things in place that would help people. They are allowing the men are in the government, men and women, whoever they are allowing these things to happen. Is that God's fault? No, it absolutely is not. So you have to stop blaming God for what evil is doing on the earth and for what men are choosing, the evil that men are choosing. So if someone decides, because this is a decision that people make, okay, they have choice. Everyone has a choice. You can either stop yourself, and yeah, there are accidents, but there are also intentional acts that people do, and they either have taken leave of their senses. I don't know, that's another thing, if somebody's kind of lost their mind maybe, but there's also just pure evil, and people allowing, and this is why I talk about purifying your heart all the time, because if you're allowing all these horrible things into your soul and your heart, you're gonna start choosing evil things at some point, and it's leading you down a wrong path. So when the Bible talks about the wages of sin is death, that's what God means by that. That's what that scripture means. The wages of sin is death. So we're talking right now about how the fear of God is the beginning of wisdom, okay? And wisdom is to hate evil. So the fear of God is to hate evil. So if we're fearing God, we are going to hate evil. And I consider myself one of those people that fears God. And in fact, I'll share a little story with you. When I was in college, and this is probably the first year I was there, which was 1992, I was in Bible college, and one of the first classes that I took, I can't remember what class it was, but of course when you're in Bible school, you take Old Testament, New Testament, you take the wisdom books, the this, the that. But one of the classes, they had us write our epitaph, and I'm like, huh? Why are you having us write our epitaph? Because they were talking about how on someone's tombstone, between the years of when they were born and the year they died, there's just a little, just a little line there. So what is that line? That whole line between the year that you're born and the year that you die, that's your whole life. That's your life. It's this little tiny line, And I remember thinking about that, like, oh my God, that's so true. However long they lived, is it 25 years, 50 years, 70 years? There's a lot in that little line right there. Dash. There's a little dash. That dash is full of stories, of that person's life that maybe no one will ever know. But so they said, what do you want your epitaph to read? So think about that dash between the year you were born, the year whenever you die. What do you want that dash to mean? What do you want your life to mean? What kind of difference do you want to make? And so they wanted us to come with a title. They wanted us to come up with an epitaph for our tombstone. What do you want it to say about you? And so my first thing that came up in my spirit was, she was a woman who feared the Lord. And I just thought, that's it. What do I want people to know about me on my tombstone, my epitaph, that little dash of my life? I want it to be that she was a woman who feared the Lord. And I didn't even know what that would mean at that time. I didn't know what my profession would be. I didn't know that I'd be going into chaplaincy or anything like that, but I knew that the legacy that I wanted to leave for whoever knew me on this earth, that I was someone who feared the Lord. So when you fear the Lord, you hate evil. So you can just tell. All you have to do is look at what's happening somewhere in a country or in a household, or any kind of, you just look at the stats or what's happening in a certain area, and you can tell, do those people fear the Lord or not? Well, probably not, because the government's allowing their people to starve. They're allowing this, they're allowing that. People are sick, they need more medical. So we're talking about thousands and thousands and thousands of people's decisions. So with a country, it's complicated because there's lots of people in the government, and everything has to be, a certain way, and laws, and then people that do obey and don't obey the laws. It's very convoluted. But what it comes down to is people's choices. If the government would get together and agree that we're going to hate evil, things would start changing, right? So God has to allow every person, every human being, to have their choice. That sucks sometimes. It's like, are you going to let this evil person have their choice, God? You're going to let them choose that? He has to let them, because we are not robots. And I know it sounds so crazy, but God cannot pull the puppet strings with us. We're not puppets, okay? So if it would be like, the Wizard of Oz, where there's this guy, the smoke screen, and God, the person isn't really what you thought they were. They weren't mighty like you thought they were behind the smoke screen. That's not it with God. God is the opposite of that. Okay, God is so much more and better and more amazing and awesome than we think He is behind the screen, because we can't see Him, right? So hopefully someday we will see Him, and we will be able to ask Him all these questions. But I'm telling you right now, it comes back to evil choices, men's evil choices. That's why it is so important for parents to be teaching their kids. And so, oh God, we could go so many places with this right now. So the enemy wants to destroy families. He's after the families because he knows that if kids grow up in a good family, they're probably not going to end up wicked and evil. They're probably going to end up on this other route here, because the parents, if they're good parents, are going to teach them that way. But if he can get people on drugs where they're neglecting their kids, he can do this, he can do that. And I'm telling you, the enemy uses deception a lot and manipulation. And so that's a lot of times where people make these choices. A lot of times, yes, they're deceived, or they the way that they think is not correct, or they just things that they've learned, they didn't learn it the right way, and so now they're acting this way, and they're choosing to do this. They're choosing to be on drugs, they're choosing to neglect their kids, they're choosing to do this and do that. And they're erroneous choices, but they're still choices. And so here's the cool part, okay? So God, it's not God's fault, Okay, so let's stop blaming God. It's not his fault that these things are happening. So he comes around it in other ways. Okay, so he gets people that are listening to him in some other country. Like here, we have so many agencies that will go and they'll take food to these places. Okay, so the governments aren't going to do what they're supposed to do. God's going to send another agency. He's going to come around it in another way. He's going to send missionaries. He's going to send people that will do good, that will do what they're supposed to do. And oftentimes they come under conflict and they come under persecution, or they have a lot of resistance to what they're trying to do because they're trying to combat that. They're trying to combat the evil, and it's not easy. And other times they are able to come in there. Like there's a lot of agencies that I listen to and watch, and ministries where they go in and they dig water wells, because let's say like in Africa, there's a lot of times the villages will not have a water source that is clean. I mean, and so women and children will have to walk for miles to just get water. So God sends these agencies to come in and build these water wells. So it's helping them. It's helping them in some way that helps them be able to grow food, for their families, vegetables. It allows them to have farms if they want to, and water. Water does a lot of things. And so God comes around the evil in the ways that he can, and he does everything that he can and uses every person that will obey. So just think about how much more we could do as a church. The church as a whole, in my humble opinion, is not doing enough. Because if the church as a whole and every Christian on the planet was doing everything they could, we could eradicate hunger, poverty, a lot of things. But the Bible does say we will always have the poor with us. Like that's not going to happen, because that's like, an idealistic thing. It's like we're in heaven again, that's how it's going to be in heaven. So that's why I think God is an idealistic God. He has a heaven that is freaking amazing. Okay, the Garden of Eden was heaven on earth, but heaven is heaven in heaven. I mean, it blows away the Garden of Eden. So it's perfection, it's everything. There's no evil, there's no pain, there's no hurt, there's no any of that in heaven. So if you think that God wants evil and I guess you could say in a way he's allowing it. He has to allow it because he's not going to go against his own. God has. He won't go against. He can't go against himself. So that's one of his things, is that he allows choice. So he's not going to go against that, but he will come around it and provide in other ways. I mean, we have so many humanitarian agencies. We have people sending shoe boxes with, Christmas things. We have, it's so cool, the things that we do, that we send out for other countries, and that's a godly thing. He wants to help anyone that is willing to do. He will use them and he will send them, and because he wants to help every hurting person. Every hurting being hurts him. He feels their pain. That's what compassion is. And so just please stop blaming God for man's stupidity, and man's choices. So back to the wisdom being hating evil. So this is why we want to fear God. It steers us away from sin. So that was the second part. The second thing I told you in the beginning is if we don't fear God, we won't take sin seriously. So it's a slippery slope, okay? The more compromises that we have, we compromise and compromise and compromise and compromise, and then all of a sudden we find ourselves over here on the evil, wicked side, even though we don't consider ourselves evil and wicked. But if we're allowing evil and wicked things into our heart and our soul, where is that going to lead? The Bible says that sin, the wages of sin is death, and evil and wickedness is death. So that's what that means. You are sinning, and it starts out slowly. It starts out slowly, and it's just a little bit, and it's, something very trivial, and then it gets further and further and further and further and further and further, and you don't want to end up over here. You really don't. So that's why sanctification is a big thing, because if you're aware and you're conscious of not sinning, you're trying to not consciously sin, because it ultimately is death and is evil. So the more that you do that, the more you're pushing yourself over to this side. You want to be on the love side. So love and evil, love and hate, they are opposites. This line in the middle is sin, okay? Which direction do you want the arrow to go? That way or that way? The more sin that you do and that you choose because you have a choice, the more sin is going to lead you this way. Like I said in one of my other videos, the flesh and the spirit are warring against each other. And because the flesh is easily sins, the flesh, it wants all, it just, you're always having to be conscious of this. But I do want to do a video where, I don't want it to feel like it's this horrible struggle every day and it's just all this angst. Like, no. If you are over here and you're choosing it, you feel that love and you bask in that love and that joy so much. You're not just over here going, oh my God, I'm, I can't do anything fun in my life. And, it's not like that. But there is somewhat of a struggle. So, and it's always going to be there. We have a sin nature. We're born with that, born with a sin nature. And that's where the struggle comes in. So if you realize that sin leads you to wickedness and evil, the less you want to sin, because God is love. And if I want to fear God, I want to turn from wickedness and evil, which means I need to sin less. I need to go away from sin. I need to pull myself away from sin, and so, yeah, let's do a video on sin soon, but right down here I wrote, sin is a barrier to our relationship with God. That was very timely that I looked over there and saw that. Sin is a barrier to our relationship with God, and a lot of times the more someone sins, the harder and harder it is to pull themselves out of that, because for one thing, the enemy comes in and starts deceiving, okay? And I see this a lot with people that I talk to. I'm so far down here, I can't get back up. And it's a lie of the enemy. So the enemy lies, and then people believe it because he puts guilt and shame on them. So here's a secret. God does not shame us. So if you're feeling shame for something that you've done, that is not of God. God does not shame us. So, how did I explain this one time? Oh, let me take a drink. Need some coffee. So if someone feels shamed, so you might feel some guilt for something you've done, okay? And that is nudging you to let it go, get rid of it, get out of it, and move back over here. That's, it's kind of like we're going to have those feelings because we're human, but God does not put shame on us. Like that book, The Scarlet Letter, this lady has to be in shame the rest of her life. That used to be my favorite book because anyway, it's another story, but kind of still is my favorite book, I think, other than the Bible, of course. But it's not a Christian book, but there's a lot of correlations there. So this woman gets shamed her whole life because she supposedly had an affair with this guy. Well, turns out he was a minister, and why wasn't he the one that was shamed? He got away with everything, and she really didn't do a whole lot, and then she's shamed for the rest of her life. So God doesn't do that. He doesn't shame us and like, oh, you're banished now. God is a God of restoration, and he is a God of bringing you back into the fold. There might be a process that you have to go through to get back there. And there are stories about that where, even a Christian minister, one of the ministers at our church, there's this whole story. He's preached on it. His wife wrote a book on it where he had an affair, and, it all came crashing down on him. And that was while he was a pastor. He was a campus pastor. Anyway, and so it all came crashing down on him. He had to, they fired him and everything. But then there's a restoration process. So if the person involved wants to repent, turn from their sins, and be restored, that can happen. And that's what God would want for us. He doesn't want us to be banished and live in shame the rest of our lives, like the lepers. Jesus always healed the lepers. They were outcasts of society. He doesn't want that for us. He never planned for anyone to be an outcast of society because he knows how hurtful and how painful that is. No, he would never want that for anyone. He wants you to be brought back into the fold. So how did I start on this subject? I'm not sure. Okay, so shame would be, so that's how the enemy deceives us. He deceives us into falling further and further down. That's what that was. So, you can never be restored. Look at you, look what you've done, and look how bad it is. And he always makes you feel like you're the worst person on the planet, right? And so if you start believing that, that's why this Battlefield of the Mind book is so awesome, because there's a battle in our thoughts. If we can win the battle in our thoughts, and not out of pride, because we don't want to get into pride, but we want to go by what God is telling us. And the whole Bible is about redemption. So God is about redemption. And if the enemy can deceive you and tell you that you cannot be redeemed for what you have done, then he's got you. And a lot of times that's why people choose evil and wickedness, because they are deceived into thinking that that's all they'll ever be, and they might as well just do more and just go further and further down. So if the enemy can get people when they're in the middle, and they've come a little bit, and he just pulls them further and further down. But God wants these people over here to be pulling them further and further this way before that happens. So once again, it's all about choices. And the thing is, fearing God, it's wise to fear God. And in my other video, I talked about how the fear of God is an overwhelming reverence and awe, and that why do we fear God? So that we'll take sin seriously, because the result of sin is death. And what that means is spiritually. And it could mean physical too, because a lot of sins do result in death, drug addicts and things that, so sin leads to death. And if it doesn't kill you physically, it will emotionally or spiritually or both or one or three, take your pick, it will kill something. So it could kill your relationship, it could kill, your family. There's a lot of ways that happens. So that is a very loaded statement, that the wages of sin is death. It's a very loaded statement, but very, very true. And this is why we want to fear God and have a reverence and awe for him. So I still wish that I could talk more about how holy God is, and holiness, and this reverence and awe. But I was thinking today about like a marriage ceremony. That is something that would be very, something where you are kind of, it's holy for sure. Marriage is holy, but the ceremony is something that is kind of, you're reverent at. But so that's something that is holy. So I was talking in my first video about how people revere like celebrities or people that are uber wealthy and stuff like that. And I was thinking of a couple stories in my own life. I thought, well, I'll just share a couple stories. So I'm going to share with you the most famous person I've ever met and the wealthiest person I have ever met. So the wealthiest person I have ever met is Oklahoma's billionaire. Okay, I'll tell you this story. So when my husband and I first got married, we each had houses that were already living in, right? And then when we got married, we didn't have enough room in either one of those houses for 4 kids. So we rented our houses out, and then we went and rented another house. Well, the landlord ended up being a lady that my husband already knew. He had been in some circles with her, and they would, they were in this little group, and they would go out and eat together and stuff, and go out for drinks or whatever. So whenever we met with her to rent this house, he recognized her. They recognized each other. I started talking and everything. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, that's good that they know each other. So then she's like, well, come and walk through the house like next week. So we meet with her at the house. We're going to do this walkthrough. Well, we get there, and she's with someone. And we were like, oh, we thought she was just going to come alone. So we walk in, and she meets us at the door, and there's this guy standing in the kitchen. And she goes, oh, yeah, we said our hellos, and we hugged, and oh, how are you doing, and da-da-da. And she's like, oh, yes, and guys, and this is Harold. And she didn't say his last name. She didn't say anything else. And we're like, oh, hi, how are you? And da-da. Right off the bat, I noticed that he was like hyper vigilant of his surroundings. And he was always looking around, not nervously, but he was very aware of his surroundings. He was looking around. He had his back to kind of a wall. So like he just made sure that that he could see everything. There was nothing behind him that he couldn't see. I don't know. I just had this perception about him. And all I did was talk to him for 30 seconds, and then the weird thing was, she took us through the house. Of course, she was the owner of the house, but she took us through and showed us everything. And he stayed in the kitchen. He did not come with us. So, I was like, no, this is interesting. I just noticed all of this. And so when we got in the car afterward and we said goodbye and everything, my husband and I looked at each other, and I said, was that Harold Ham? And he goes, I think so. He goes, well, didn't you notice the $250,000 Mercedes in the driveway? And I said, I noticed the Mercedes because I love Mercedes anyway. I had no idea it was that expensive of one. I don't really know prices of cars like that. He's the car guy, so of course he knew. But I was like, oh, it was a model that was that expensive. He goes, yeah, that was a really nice Mercedes. He goes, yeah, I think that was Harold Ham. And then we found out later that she was dating Harold Ham. And Harold Ham is Oklahoma's billionaire. He is an oil tycoon, and in this city that we lived, this little town that we lived in, that's the town that he was born in, and he had a business there. He had his oil business there. Well, this town, anyway, it's a long story, but this town is so stupid, they kind of ran him out of town, and he had to take his whole business. This had already happened prior, or was just happening at that time. I think this was all going down at that time. It's about 10 years ago or so. And so she, I don't know. We'll not go to that part of the story. But anyway, so now his business is in Oklahoma City because he can't have his business there anymore. But the weird thing is that I had met Sue Ann Ham years prior to that because my ex-husband was on the board of a university, and she was either on the board or I don't know what she was, but I remember we all went out to dinner. All the board members went out to dinner one night, and she was there, and they sat me right next to her. And so at that time, she was still married to Harold Ham. I didn't know really who he was. I didn't understand, I just knew he was an oil guy. And so she and I talked through the whole dinner. She was very nice, all this stuff. And later on, she became pretty well known in the news because her divorce settlement was like one of the highest divorce settlements ever. It was like $900 million or something. So Harold Ham is a multi-billionaire. I think he was worth $6 or $7 billion. So she ended up with almost $1 billion in the divorce. And I remember watching the news and I'm like, oh my God, Sue Ann and Harold are getting divorced. That's crazy. And like I sat with her and at dinner and we talked and everything. Now that day I'm meeting Harold Ham, so this was just really crazy. So now looking back on that, it is one of those things that you're kind of in awe of. Like, when do you meet a billionaire? Like this man, the reason he was so hyper vigilant about his surroundings is because he normally has bodyguards with him because he can be kidnapped at any day, any time, and held for ransom. That's how rich he is. It's like, okay, and this is another sidebar to the story. Is there was a guy that worked for me. I won't say what trade because that might give it away, but anyway, he was this lady who is now dating Harold Ham. I don't know if they're still together because I lost touch with her. And actually, I was Facebook friends with Harold Ham for a long time after that. We were Facebook friends. It was funny. I don't know what happened with that, but so this guy that I knew was her cousin. This lady that was dating him, he was her cousin. And so when he would come over and work at my house once in a while, I would talk to him. And I said, oh, isn't she dating Harold Ham? And he goes, yeah, she is. And he said he comes to our family events and family dinners and stuff. He's really nice, down to earth. And he would tell me all these stories. It was really hilarious. he told me stories about how, Garth Brooks would pick him up from the airport. I mean, all this weird stuff. And I'm like, oh, okay. But he said, but sometimes in our family dinners, he'll have to step out and take important phone calls. And I'm like, oh, really? And I'm like who? Like, what do you mean? And he goes, oh, just, oh, nothing major, just like, Benjamin Netanyahu, people like that. I was like, oh, okay. So, yes, so this person, because of his wealth, has influence, has some type of power and authority. So you get my gist. He is on phone calls with Benjamin Netanyahu, and God only knows who else. So whenever someone is that wealthy, they have influence. So that's kind of what I'm saying about the how you would have awe for someone. So God has influence with everyone, I mean, let's just not even try to do this comparison here. There's no comparison. But that's an earthly example of kind of what I'm talking about. So here's another example. So I was thinking, who's the most famous person that I've met? I mean, I've met several, but I think the most famous would be Joel Osteen. So whenever my parents were on track to become missionaries, we would go to, at that time it was John Osteen. His father, John, was the pastor. And when we would go, that was 30 years ago, 35 years ago, when we would go, it was John Osteen's church. So it's Lakewood Church, and we would go there every year. They would have a conference, and we would go to it every year. And when we were getting ready to launch out to go to Costa Rica, because we had already been to Mexico for a while, we were in Guadalajara for 6 months. My parents did language school there. Right before we launched out, we were at one of those conferences, and we went to Lakewood Church. And so my dad, before he passed, had told me that, Joel used to be a cameraman behind the scenes. He was never public. He was always behind the scenes as one of John's cameramen. And so my dad, when he would go in there and talk to John Osteen, he would wave and say hi to Joel, and they knew each other because we would go there every year. And I guess, this is back when they weren't famous. I mean, it was a big church. It was still a really big church, but now, Joel Osteen is way more famous, I think, than John ever was, because he's got this huge TV show, and now he's got the Compact Center and all this stuff. So I had already met him at that time, but I don't really remember it. I don't. I was probably 9 or 10. So one time, Joel Osteen came here to Oklahoma City, and I kid you not, I had no idea he was even here, because for some reason, who knows what he came here for? Maybe to meet with someone or whatever it was. But I was in here in the study, and I was on my email, and for some reason, normally I don't even open these emails. I get so many of them, and I was on one of Joel Osteen's emails. I opened it up. Don't ask me why. And it said, Joel Osteen is at Barnes & Noble, and it was that day. I'm looking at it going, really? Is that today? Yeah, he's at Barnes & Noble right here down my street, a couple miles. And he's only there for a 3-hour window or whatever it was. And I'm sitting there going, really? So, and one of my friends was in town from California, and so we were supposed to meet that day. So I called her up, and I'm like, well, how would you like to go see Joel Osteen? I think he's here at Barnes & Noble. And she's like, really? So they didn't announce it, because that's another person that has to have security around him. So they only said to the people that were on this email, because most of them are devout Christians, or they're devout Christians if you're on these emails, right? So they announced it through the email, but the news didn't say anything about it. They might have said he was in town, but they didn't say he is going to be at Barnes & Noble on this day at this time to greet people. So I told her, well, I think he's here. I mean, let's go see. So she comes over, we hop in the car and we drive down there, right? So we get there and there's cars there, but it's not like you would think, you know, if Joel Osteen announces that he's here to meet people, there's going to be thousands of people waiting. And I said, I don't know if this is really real or not or what. But anyway, so we went inside and sure enough, there's this huge line of people. There's security there. There's policemen. Paul Folger, one of the news people, was all dressed in a three-piece suit, and he was there and he was talking to him. And so we were standing in this line and we got to meet Joel Osteen. It was actually kind of funny because they take your photo of you with him. You give someone your phone and they take a photo of you. They do it with everyone so that everyone can have a photo. And in the photo, my friend is standing there just looking like, when are you gonna shut up? Because I was like talking Joel Osteen's ear off. It was so hilarious because I wanted to tell him this story of how we met when I was younger and they helped my family launch out. Because there's no way he would remember that. It was his dad that did it, and it was 30 some odd years ago, you know. And so I was telling him, it was something I needed to do. And I think that's why God set up that meeting that day, because it was something that I needed to say to Joel Osteen. I don't know why. And the whole time he stood there and he smiled and he nodded his head. It was the cutest thing. And my friend is standing over there like, are you gonna stop talking to him so that I can come up and meet him now? It's so funny if I show you the picture, but yes, so I had already met him when I was younger, don't remember it, but now I have a picture of me meeting him right here at Barnes & Noble. And so I guess that's the most famous person I met, but it's just an example of someone that you would be kind of in awe of. Oh my God, it's Joel Osteen, and he's got policemen around him. Like, you know, you can't just go up to him and talk to him because of all the weirdos out there, you know, so they ruin it for the rest of us. We can't have access to people now anymore. But so those are my two stories of people that you might be in awe of. So just think of someone that you would not only be in awe of, but that you would revere, but someone that is holy and has glory around them. I mean, it's pretty cool. It's pretty amazing. So those are my two little stories. And oh shoot, I had another story I was going to say. It was a judge that I met while I was a real estate agent. I showed him houses and we connected. He was a really cool guy. He was appointed here by President Trump. When Trump was in office, he was actually appointed here, and that's how he moved here. And so he didn't know anyone. So we kind of chatted a little bit. And of course, I had his number because I was his agent at the time. But one day he sent me an invite. He invited me to his, it was his swearing in ceremony. He sent me an invite to his swearing in ceremony down here in Oklahoma City. And I was like, wow, I've never been to something like that. So I went. It was so cool. They had some people singing, and then they had people speaking. They had like a senator there that spoke. You know, there's all these like high profile people there for the swearing in. It was a really amazing ceremony. And a lot of the news people were there because they were covering it, and it was, it was on the news, and it was a really amazing thing that I got to see. And there were several other judges there. They spoke. There's all these, like I don't know. There was a bunch of I wish I could remember. I had it on Instagram, but there was a bunch of different high-profile people there that spoke, and then they swore him in. It was really amazing. His wife was there, and so that's an example of an earthly, court, and that's kind of how God operates. He has a heavenly court, and he's the judge and all that. So that is an example of it's an earthly example of what is done in heaven, actually, which would be a really cool video. But to see a judge being sworn in is really, I felt like it was an honor to go to that, and that is one of those ceremonies that you would be completely in awe of, and very respectful. There was some kind of revering and respect, while you're there. It's this whole program they do. It was really awesome. And then afterward they had a reception. I was able to go up to him and speak to him. Of course, I've lost touch with him now, and why I lose touch with everyone. But that was just a really neat thing I got to experience. And this all ties into this whole fear of God, because the fear of God is reverence and awe. And so those are examples of a person that you would have reverence and awe for. A famous person, Joel Osteen, one of the richest people in the world, Harold Hamm, and then a judge being sworn in. So those are my personal stories to explain to you earthly examples of this reverence and awe that we should have for God, but couple that with the holiness that he has. He's absolutely holy, and the glory that surrounds him. So it would be, that times, to the 100, to the 1,000 power, or however you can say it. There's really no way to measure that. So if you would couple all of those together, it might give you an idea of what it's like to reverence and awe and honor God as the absolute holiest being there ever was, ever will be, and that is right now. And he's worthy of our worship and our reverence. So please like and subscribe if you like this video, and I am trying to do videos more frequently. I was going to give a little update today. So my update is that I don't think I'll be doing book hauls anymore, because I have 2 huge bookcases full. I actually don't have enough room for all the books I have right now. So I don't think I'm going to be doing book hauls and anymore. I might recommend a book, but I don't know if I will actually buy it and have it here with me to recommend, to show. So that'll be something a little bit different. And then I'm going to try and do a few, 5-10 minute videos to have, 5 or 10 minute videos to have, so I can cater to both audiences. Someone like me likes kind of longer videos, but I'd like to also cater to some other watchers that might not want to watch something that long. So I'm going to try to do some 5-10 minute videos. And then YouTube has this thing called Shorts now, which is kind of like Reels, like Facebook has Reels, and then it's kind of like TikTok. So it's kind of trying to compete with both of them. with these, shorts. So it's kind of like a TikTok. It's, like 60 seconds or less. You do this little thing and they put it up and then people can watch it, and that kind of draws people to your channel. So I'm going to try and work on that, do some shorts, and just try to branch out a little bit and, change it up a little bit. So no more book hauls, and I'm going to try to do some shorter videos for you guys. But so this sums up the ending of the fear of God, and then we can move on to something else. So do I want to tackle the problem of evil? Maybe. I mean, I kind of tackled it in this video here with the fear of God. The second part, kind of tackled it in there. There's not much else really to say, but if I study it, I might be able to find a few more things to say. We will go from there. So either the problem of evil or sin. What is sin? One of those two probably will be next. So we are going to end it for today, and I will, be working on my other videos, and I hope to see you soon in the next video. Take care.